Every web company I've ever worked for has wished it could capture what was going on in the user's browser for lots of different reasons. The first one always being, we've just launched, people are going to our registration page of our new site, but they aren't signing up. Why? Is it broken? Is it too confusing? Is it too long? Are people clicking around for ages and not being able to submit? Are we asking them for 18 different fields, including their date of birth and their gender, when all they're trying to do is buy a light bulb? It's probably that, actually. But it can be maddening to know that something's going wrong with the formula and not to know what. You wish you could peer over their shoulder as they were doing it. As an extension of that, you really wish you had more context if the page crashes. If you're using one of those services that sends JavaScript stack traces back to a central server, you're doing better than a lot of people, but you still wish you knew what your user was looking at, what they were clicking on, what their journey was at the point it crashed. You might wish you knew the state of the DOM. The more data you can get about a crash, the better. And in theory, that data should be really easy to capture. The DOM is just data. CSS is just data. There's a mutation API you can tap into. You should be able to record this stuff. In practice, it's a can of worms. It actually sounds quite horrible. And this week's episode is all about how someone is doing that difficult work, and I'm glad it's not me. Joining me to wade through the morass of subtle browser differences is Justin Halsall. He's a major contributor to RRWeb, which is a project that lets you record and replay what's going on web pages. For any reason from gathering information for debugging purposes, whether they're technical debugging or usability debugging, to creating things like content-aware demo videos where you can tap into the DOM as the video plays. It's a very handy project. It's a potential privacy question, which we'll get into, and it's an implementation that's filled with war stories and interesting browser trivia. So let's get into it. I'm your host, Chris Jenkins. This is Developer Voices, and today's voice is Justin Halsall. I'm joined today by Justin Halsall. Justin, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Chris?
I'm good. You're over somewhere just over the English Channel, aren't you? Somewhere in North Europe.
Yes. I'm in Amsterdam at the moment.
Amsterdam?
Yeah.
Ah, that explains, because that's where we met. You didn't have far to commute.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. No, I came by bicycle, I think. No, that's not true. Normally I do, but that was the exception that night.
One day I caught someone who lives in Amsterdam not using a bicycle.
Yes.
Awesome. So you sound far too casual for what it is you actually do, which sounds to me like a real Sisyphean task, right? Which is pretending that all browsers are basically the same just to try and get what you're doing done. But take me through. So you've created RRWeb. Take me through what it is and how it does what it does. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So what RRWeb does is it basically records anything a user does in a browser. And so that's user interaction, like clicking, typing, that sort of stuff. But also all of the HTML and CSS, all of the mutations to the HTML and CSS. And then what it does in the end is it replays all of that in the browser again. So it creates an iframe, and then everything that you did and it recorded initially, it will replay that. And there's a bunch of companies using it for analytics. It started out as kind of like a Hotjar clone by one of the other creators of RRWeb, and we use it for creating video tutorials, basically. But okay. Ultimately, it's like just recording absolutely everything that goes on in the browser, and then acting like we're doing it the first time.
When I first heard about that, I thought that on the surface that sounds really easy, right? Sure. There's an DOM event API. You tap into that, you just record what it says, and then replay it. And I just have a feeling like it's one of those things that's simple in theory, and in practice, it's an absolute misery of slight browser differences.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, and even even some browsers, they will lie about the state of how they're in.
Oh,
And
how fun!
yes, and then they'll give you back something else, and if you put that back into the same browser, then it will break. So it's like, and this is specifically has to do with CSS values, where um, you give Chrome like a prefix -WebKit CSS value, or
Yeah.
CSS attribute, I should say, and then it gives you you didn't use the -WebKit piece. And then once you go ahead and play that, Chrome doesn't actually understand it without the dashed WebKit value. So it's like it's a total mess of just all of these weird edge cases, and yeah. So that's the browser side of things, and then there's the someone's building a website and they've got a bunch of different libraries in there, which totally mess with the whole state of the browser. So that's also pretty tricky.
Right. I can believe that. We need to unpack all of that.
Yeah. So
Start me off on the naive implementation. If I, how far?
yeah.
What would I do, and how far would I get before I gave up in despair?
So you'd start with the mutation observer on the recording side. So yeah, like you said, mutation observer, it will give you can ask it to kind of subscribe to all of the different changes to the DOM that happen. And it will give you that. You can start recording that, and then start replaying it on the other side. That will give you kind of like a naive implementation. Um, and then really quickly you're going to bump into like, okay, well, what happens when there's an iframe there? And okay, if it's the same origin iframe, then we can put another mutation observer inside of that. And then what happens with shadow DOM? And what happens if it's cross origin iframe? You need to run the same script inside of that again. And yeah, and then so that's just the HTML changing over time part. You need to record the CSS.
Is there a
So
similar
that's
API for that?
no, 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 not at all.
Lovely. Okay.
So it's like, actually, it's not completely true. You can use the mutation observer, but only if the CSS has been if it's put in with a style element, and the CSS has been added as a text as text node, and if that gets changed, then you do get the mutation observer will pick that up, but that's not the only way you can add CSS.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it, and you need to also catch all of those different ways as well.
See, if I were building this with something like user testing, I
Yeah.
would just say, okay, we're supporting one very specific browser for a very
Mm-hmm.
specific set of use cases.
Yeah.
And I would just despair of actually trying to support multiple browsers for all possible use cases and all possible libraries that the end
Yeah.
user, that the company is putting in. Take me through your madness.
Well, that's also kind of the power of open source as well. It's like, so I'm working on this use case that works for me, and then somebody else is working on that use case that works for them, and then someone else is like, well, let's just run it inside of a test environment in like JS DOM or something like that, which isn't a browser but just mimics a browser. And then that will get us all kinds of other weird use cases. And then as long as somebody else goes ahead and solves that, then
Oh, I
I'm more than
see.
happy to accept it and
So
add
what
it
you're
to the
doing is
library.
very much like community on the brute force side of trying to
Yes.
make things okay. Okay,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And so I was naive enough because I'm not the initial creator of RRWeb, although I've added probably more code than anybody has in the last couple of years. Um, but I was like, oh, let me just build this myself. And then I found RRWeb. Luckily, I didn't go ahead and start building it myself because it seems doable enough, and then you just start like bumping into all kinds of different edge cases and use cases and things. Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe. I'm thinking I want to test you on some of the other edge cases. So canvas tags, is that just a black
Oh yeah.
hole?
It was until we started doing kind of like a man in the middle attack with regards to canvas elements. So for especially for WebGL, it does kind of work. So what we do is we will monkey patch all of the whole interface to the canvas elements, and then you send it a command. You say, okay, well, I want to paint this and that over there. And then what we do is we go ahead and we save that command, and then on the playback side, we just replay it as just the way you called them, and then actually you get something that looks pretty good.
Do you get something that looks pretty good in theory, or are you actually saying it works in practice?
It does. It works in practice. The problem with it is people call this every single frame, probably with some pretty big bitmap images or objects. So the file size starts growing crazy. So that's one issue with it. Another issue is that WebGL is not like every single browser can have slight differences to it. So your recording in one browser might not actually work that well in a different browser. So that's definitely a downside to it. So we created another way of recording Canvas,
right?
Which is like you interrogate the Canvas object and you say, okay, well, give me back everything you have in pixels, and then we just do that we do that 15 times a second or something like that. Basically, just create snapshots.
Oh yeah.
And then
Yeah, like recording a flickbook of what it was showing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That feels like it would still bump up the file size a lot, but perhaps not quite as much.
Yeah. So in certain cases where you don't have constant animation, that's a lot nicer, because we can just check. Okay, well, was this the same as the last one?
Oh, so you do diff as well?
Yeah, we do diff. Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's the same, then we don't send it to the server. Downside of that one is if you have a big canvas element and you say, okay, well, to data URI, it then freezes the whole browser for the moment while it's doing that. So it's like, okay, well, we can't do that. Let's do this on a web worker. And then you have the whole web worker overhead, which means that we can't actually do it like 15 frames per second. We can probably do it a little bit less. Anyway, so that's the downside of that again. And then there's a third way of recording Canvas with WebRTC. Yeah, anyway. So like you said, Canvas is a black hole, but in this case, with regards to time.
Yeah. Okay, I'm already instantly glad that you're trying this project and not me. Let me try another one. Push back on me if this is too obscure, but it's on my mind, and you just mentioned time and timing. There is a Midi API in the browser, to pick something exotic, where you can send data to and from musical instruments.
Yeah.
And that's simple data. It's low bandwidth, so I believe you can capture that, but it's very timing sensitive music.
Yeah.
Do you have anything special handling that? Have you tried to handle it?
At the moment, we haven't really, but the way that I would do that is we would. So certain cases where the browser is like, well, we're not going to help you with that, like Canvas. Then we would go ahead and monkey patch the interface to it. So in the case of MIDI controller, we'd probably do that as well. We'd just monkey patch, and then whatever you would send to it, we would save it and grab the timestamp, and then send it on. But yeah, I would be curious to see how far we're off every so often, and for visual playback, it doesn't really matter that much. But for something like MIDI, it might.
Yeah, I guess you've got more wiggle room on visuals.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Exactly, because the browser is like doing its thing anyway. So it's like, yeah.
Okay. Maybe since you've talked about file sizes for Canvas tags, maybe we should dive a bit below the hood and think about how you're storing this data. Give me the internal file format, and we can pick it apart from there.
Yeah, for sure. So we're storing this whole thing in JSON. So it's
Kill surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so basically we're turning all the HTML, we're turning the whole DOM tree into a tree of nodes. And then for certain other things, we have certain other ways of saving it. But we also have additional nodes that get added or attributes that were mutated. And we basically have like an ID that tracks the location of all of the different nodes, or not the location, but like what that node is. And we kind of have something similar to video where it's like a like a keyframe, or we call it full snapshot. And then the changes happen in like incremental snapshots. So it's like a
Okay.
diff on top of the full snapshot.
Right. So capture the screen, diff for a bit, and then you can resynchronize if you have to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How often are you resynchronizing it?
We don't. I do know some people that use the open source project. They'll do like every second or something like that. But I think it has to do with certain use cases where, yeah, RRWeb's just buggy for that use case, and then this is their way of kind of like working around it, basically.
Okay.
That's on
So
the recording side, yeah.
So you end up with this large JSON file, which must look like an MP4 file under the hood, like semantically.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's turning the DOM into an event
Yeah.
system. You're capturing it. This suddenly is reminding me of one of my friends, Kafka.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and the moment that we get the event, we send it through to the server. Other people will do something else with it, but we try and send it as quickly as we can, get it out of the browser. Because the moment that you, for example, do a page navigation, boom, your context is gone, and all the events that you still had will, if they weren't synced to the server, then they're lost, basically.
Oh, okay. That must make it enormously difficult to get reliable recordings of a session.
Yeah, there's it can be. Yeah, we spend a lot of time creating like puppeteer tests and all that kind of stuff to mimic certain situations, so that so that we can make it as reliable as possible.
Okay. So I have to ask, how reliable is it in practice? I've played around with your web demos, but out in the wild.
Yeah. It depends. It really depends on the website. So certain websites, it's flawless, pretty much. But there's certain other ones where it's just just not very reliable. So, for example, but that has more to do with what technologies people are using. So, if they're using technology that we haven't anticipated yet,
Oh,
then
yeah.
yeah, that's that. But for example, Salesforce, they have this thing called LWC, Lightning Web Components,
Okay.
and they basically use what's it called? I forget the name. Shadow DOM, yeah, Shadow DOM. Except they've monkey patched absolutely every API for it, and they're doing something else. So, if you interrogate it and be like, okay, well, what's like, how many children do you have, or who's your parent, whatever,
Yeah.
then it will give you something else back than is actually happening in the browser. So,
Oh, is that because
for
they've
that,
monkey patched it badly, or
yes,
okay,
yeah,
fair enough.
yes. And then I've been going through that project, through the code of that project, and there's a lot of comments like non-standard, but probably won't matter. That's the comment above it, and I'm like, matters to me quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. But that must come up a fair bit, right? I mean, like the Node package library. There are so many packages out there of
Yeah,
quality ranging from superb to
yeah,
ridiculous, right?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
What do you do? Do you just verify it with the most popular ones? How do you monkey patch without both stepping on other people's toes and have them constantly stepping on yours?
Yeah. So we one is when we monkey patch, we try and not change any behaviors. We're really just there to kind of like read what the message is that comes in, and then send it through to the browser. So if there's, for example, maybe there's two RRWebs running, then we'll do that. We'll read it and then send it through to the next one, for example.
Okay.
Um, so because that happens as well sometimes. It's like there's we've become pretty popular right now. So there's multiple tools that are sometimes run on the same website
Ah,
that use us. So for example, Sentry might use us for like error tracking, and then there could be like PostHog, which is using us for analytics. So they might be running at the same time.
okay.
So we try and not, we try and just don't change anything, don't change any behavior. It's just like grab it and send it on. But for in the case of somebody else, like monkey patching it badly, for example, date. We mentioned time before. Some people monkey patch the date object, so it gives you back something completely different. So it's like yay.
Hooray.
So what I recently did is I injected an iframe into the DOM, which is pretty dirty, but it was the only way to do it. And I got all of the elements and all of their kind of like all of their getters and all of their functions that are part of the element object or the node object, and I copied a reference to them, and then I removed the iframe, and then that way, whenever we need to actually go ahead and ask, for example, an element about who's your parent node or parent element, instead of just calling .parent element on it, we do it via that reference that I recorded from the iframe,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
they often haven't gone through the trouble to monkey patch that one, because it's that'd be a lot of extra work and nobody would get any benefit from it. So that's one way of kind of like working around some of these nasty monkey patches.
Right. Open a clean room and just grab references to everything you know is
Exactly.
untouched.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh boy. This is reminding me of the early days of the web when people used jQuery, not because it was like a great framework, but because it was your only hope of maintaining a stable, sane
Yeah.
interface across different browsers. Do you get that?
Yeah.
What width of browser do you, not width is the wrong word, what spread of browsers do you support? Are you just like the big three, or are you going into like phones?
Yeah. We basically do. Well, we basically do like Can I Use has like or it's not that there's an open source library which tracks compatibility. And then we're basically on the default version, which is the late. I'm not sure. It's like 96% support or something like that.
Right.
The only one that we don't do from that list, so that doesn't. By the way, that doesn't include Internet Explorer anymore. So we don't support that anymore, but we did until pretty recently. But the only one that we exclude from that list is Opera Mini, because Opera Mini, everything's running on the server, so we can't monkey patch. We have no mutation observer as far as I know. So there's no way of us doing it. So it's like, okay,
Okay.
well, fine.
That's fair.
But in theory, we do support everything, and even if somebody has some sort of weird use case, some edge case that they're happy to fix themselves and send a pull request for, then we'll be happy to accept it, basically.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah. The joy of open source. You can always tell people to
Yes.
fix it themselves.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, well, you've
Yeah.
you've hinted at this, but give me some, because the obvious way I would think this would be used is like
Mhm.
recording user testing sessions and then playing
Yeah,
it back and realizing, oh, sign up form is ridiculous in practice.
exactly. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
got to be one of them. But how are people using this?
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's definitely one of them, and that's definitely, I think, that was for a lot of people, that's the main use case. But we're also like Sentry, as I said, they're using it for whenever a bug happens. So say error message pops up, then I believe in their user interface, they're going to give you the last 60 seconds before that bug happened, and they'll show you. And I think this is also the way that Datadog is using it. There was a project which oh yeah, so there's a couple of projects which basically are helping the elderly. So they get stuck and they're like, "Help! I need help!" And then what it does is it streams their browser live to
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
else who can then see, what's going on, and then help them in that way. There's
Is
support.
that two-way out of interest? Can they then
Yes,
send back moving the mouse for them?
yes, they can. Yeah, yeah.
I
We
need
didn't
this
build
for my
that part,
father-in-law.
but that is something that some people did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then for customer support, this is also a great use case. It's not just the elderly, which could benefit from that.
Yeah.
And then the thing that we're using it for is we want we want to make it really easy for you to create video tutorials. Um,
Yeah.
and then what we end up doing is, because we know a lot more about what's going on, we can actually do a lot of editing for you, and we can actually identify that, hey, you made a typo when you were filling in that form. So we can give you a nice paste animation like you did it correctly on the first time. And we can also change a lot of the DOM after the fact. So for example, you're showing your actual email address and you don't want that in your customer facing videos. Or you can just uh, say, okay, well, I want to replace john@doe.com with something else. You can do that, and then our app will, we'll be able to fix that basically.
Okay. So for that to work, the suite of it must be something that records all the events to your big JSON list,
Yeah,
something that plays that back as though it were the original website.
yeah,
Presumably, you've got some editor that says, "Here's all the events. Do you want to regret some of them?"
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we have kind of like a two-part editor. So exactly that. So what, for example, text nodes would we like to replace or edit or whatever, or translate, because that's also something that pops up.
Oh, yeah.
So some of our customers are like, okay, well, we'd like a video, but in 15 different languages. And we're like, okay, well, we can do that. So that just replaces all the text nodes pretty much. Um, that's a simplified version, but that's pretty much what it does. And then the other side of it is editing the video, which is like cutting the pieces out, um, which where basically there was nothing happening, or slowing parts down, or identifying other things which are not very interesting, and removing them. And that's the video editing part, but it's really just going through the JSON files and identifying these different situations and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can see that. Turn what happened into data, and then you can project that data back out in different interesting ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
Doesn't this doesn't this bring up a problem that you've mentioned?
Hmm.
Like, I record the screen, me typing in my email address, and I decide I don't want to use my personal email address in the final thing.
Yeah.
So I go to the editor, I change it to bob@bob.com,
Hmm.
which is fine for about 2 seconds before the snapshotting mechanism that you mentioned reverts the DOM back to exactly what it was a second after I was typing. How are you handling that case?
Well, that's fine, because we basically track the string that you wanted to replace, and we just go through all of the events, and we replace it everywhere. So, for example, if you're typing it in a form field, and then you'll type it, and maybe you hit enter, and then bloop, it pops down to maybe it's to-do list or something like that.
Oh,
Um,
of course, yeah.
and then we need to make sure that we don't just replace what was in the form, but we need to replace what's the to-do field or the to-do item, for example.
Right.
So we really got to just go through everything and figure it out. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
So you have to be kind of contextually aware of the way these different forms get used.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So what about within all that? Let me think. Where do we go next on this? The obvious problem that next springs to mind is this could be a privacy issue, right? I mean, how much can people use this to record their users, and what's the ethical boundary on that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that we do out of the box is password fields we don't record. So if you're typing in anything to that, we basically anonymize that. And there we do have some privacy mechanisms to say, okay, well, I don't want to record this type of thing, or you can add like an RR block or RR mask class to different form fields
Okay, so you
to
can do it
hide the
cooperatively.
contents of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a tool, and you could use it for whatever you'd like. So yeah, if you have bad intentions, you could totally create a privacy issue with it. The thing that I'm most kind of like concerned about is that we haven't had enough time to really delve into getting the best kind of like sane defaults. So I'm afraid that that people might use it out of the box and not think about it and record things that they shouldn't. That's the thing that I'm most afraid of. That's on my list, but not. I haven't gotten to it, unfortunately.
Yeah. I suppose there are things that like almost impossible for you to guarantee. Like you record the events, you're sending them back to their server. They really should be putting that over HTTPS, but I guess you
Oh yeah,
can't guarantee that.
no,
Simple
we
things like
can't do
that.
that. No,
Yeah. Okay.
no.
So caveat emptor, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and there was a study not too long ago about like the top, what was it, 100 websites, and all of the different tools that they were using, and how many were basically recording information that they shouldn't have. And I have no idea how much of this is RRWeb, but I'm sure that this can also happen with RRWeb. So yeah, it's something that I do tell people about when they start using it. Like,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, it's powerful
Yeah.
in many ways. So
I
watch
suppose
that.
in the end, as a user, you are giving that data to the website you're on anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
there's an implicit trust from the very moment you join the website, right?
yeah,
And that's going to be
yeah. And
well
I
or
think
badly founded.
it really has to do as well with like, if you're paying for a service, then generally, and this is different per person, but this is kind of something that I've noticed, people are generally okay with the service kind of like tracking what they're doing, um, and improving on top of that. But a lot of free services where they'll be tracking what you're doing, people are just not happy with that, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess it comes back to that
so
thing as if you're paying them, you're buying a product, and if you're not paying them, you're the product.
exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. Well, let's think of something a bit equally wide scale, but perhaps less malicious, hopefully
Yeah,
benevolent, right? Because this is a problem I've faced, like with web startups. You've got, I would like to be able to record people using our registration form, right?
yeah,
And maybe I've got a
hmm
few thousand of those. I'm not planning to look through them all at once.
hmm
What I'd like to do is say, give me, in theory, I should be able to do this, can I? I say, okay, give me a summary mouse pointer cloud of all the places that people clicked on my registration form, and then split that out by the people that successfully registered, those that clicked the submit button but didn't register, and those that didn't even click it. Because I have a feeling that those three cohorts would teach me something useful. Can I do
hmm
that?
yeah. Um, it depends. So you, with certain tools that use RWeb, you definitely can. Well, it's because we're more like just a recording tool. The data analysis part is kind of up to other people. But something that's very easy to implement is just track how often someone clicked, and if they click very often in sequence, then probably they're really frustrated, and you should check out the recording. It's like click, 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 click,
Yeah.
rage click.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that a lot of the tools or the companies that use RWeb, that's the first thing to implement. Basically, it's like is that because you can very easily pull that out of the data.
Okay. So we really
Yeah.
are getting into a kind of Kafka-ish space where you've got this big event log, and then you can do all kinds of interesting stream processing on it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's up
for
to you to
sure. Yeah.
define the question you've got to ask.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I could, in theory, come up with a transformation that went through all those log files. And what would I do? Create a synthetic file in the same format that just seemed to have lots of different mouse pointers. Could
Yeah,
I
you
do
could do
that?
that. What a
Would you
lot
then
of
play it
people,
back?
yeah, what a lot of people do is they will kind of add like a custom event with the same timestamp as the first moment when, for example, one of these rage clicks happened, and the last moment. And then that would in the player you can kind of highlight these different events, and then that would that would be one way of kind of like tagging when something happened. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's a lot of different ways of doing it.
Okay, so this makes me wonder, in your mind, to what degree is the product, the tool, a thing that reliably captures the browser and turns it into events? Or, I mean, you could almost imagine a situation where the data description, the event log, that was the real product. Just uh, will there be a spec for the data format? Will that be published in the thing that people build on top of independently of you?
It's a good question. It's a good question. At the moment, because we're using TypeScript, the whole event format is just we have a lot of types for it, so
Okay,
you can kind
that's
of
my preferred spec.
exactly, you can kind of use that as the spec.
Yeah.
So that's what most people do at the moment, but we don't really have an official spec, and so far it's always been we've always added to it. We've never kind of like broken backwards compatibility with it. So yeah. Anyway, that's the depth we've gone into to kind of make it a spec. But yeah, you can turn it into all kinds of different things, and people do. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see potential for that. But I'm like giving you more work when you've got plenty of work just capturing it reliably, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about, because you're a major contributor to the open source project RRWeb,
Yeah.
which is this record and playback. And
Yeah.
then you've got record once as the kind of alternative to doing videos of my website, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah.
a little about that. Was it that, is that your business, and was it like business first then open source, or is this your attempt to say, hang on, there's a commercial angle here?
Well, it was really business first, open source. I kind of found the project while I was building Record Once. I was like, okay, well,
Ah.
the way that we do these recordings is kind of broken. There's too much kind of like human, non-creative human tedious effort that's going into these videos. We should find a better way. So that's what I started doing, and then I found Record Once, and sorry, I found RWeb, and then initially I was like, I'm building a startup, I'm not raising any venture capital, I don't have money, I don't have the budget to contribute to open source. That's what I thought. Um, and so when I found a bunch of bugs in RWeb, I was like, well, the fastest thing to do is just fork it, fix the bugs, and then that's that. And so that's what I did initially. And then somebody else fixed exactly the same bugs, and somebody else added some features that I then ended up needing. So I was like, okay, well, let me merge what I have with upstream, and then now I'm trying to figure out who solved the bugs in the better way.
Yeah.
And it's nearly never me, because the other side had like gone through a pull request process, and more angles were considered and stuff like that. And so the initial bugs that I'd fixed ended up taking so much more time just on merge issues, basically. And so I was like, okay, well, this is clearly not a strategy that's working. So instead, every bug I found, let me just send a pull request for it.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, I get into a conversation with the creator of RRWeb, and he's like, there's quite a few requests coming in there. Do you maybe want to be part of the core team? And I was like, yes, that would be great.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so that was basically how I got into contributing to open source in a major fashion with RRWeb. And since then, I've kind of my belief of like, oh, small company, we don't have money for that, we don't have time for that, we don't have resources for that. It's completely changed. So like every single feature I create goes into main first before it ends up in our product. So that's how it's really switched it around, basically.
That's the first time I've ever heard a kind of reversal of the tragedy of the commons argument.
Yeah.
Where it's actually easier for you to become part of contributing more generally. Oh, that gives me hope. It gives me hope that the universe might not be falling into a fiery heat death anytime soon.
Yes, yeah. But it does take. It takes. As I say, it takes a village. So now I'm also reviewing other people's pull requests, and there'll be times when I am too busy and I can't. And luckily, there's a couple other core team members, but life happens. So there's moments where I'm sure people contribute absolutely amazing things, and we just don't get to get to reviewing it or get to fixing it. One thing that I will say, if you're looking to fix something in an open source project, the thing that we check first before we check anything else is like the pull request. So if you have an issue, it's faster for you to, if you can solve it, to solve it and send a pull request for it, then that will get accepted long before we actually go into the issues and say, okay, what's something that we think we should fix, and then
you deal with the solutions
unfortunately.
first and the problems second.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's fair enough.
the path of least resistance in life, I think.
That makes sense. Whenever I want to contribute to an open source project, I usually start with fixing the documentation.
Oh yeah, that's a good
Because
one.
it's a good way to get myself known to the developers and to see how they're going to respond to people coming in with changes.
Yeah.
Plus,
Yeah,
I'm great at nitpicking on grammar, so that always helps.
You've got to play to your strengths, really. You
absolutely,
have to.
yeah.
Also, in
And
open
no one
source.
wants to fix documentation, so that's usually a welcome thing.
No.
Okay.
And we also have so the creator of RRWeb, he's Chinese. His name is Yuanzhen. And so we also have all the documentation in Chinese. But,
oh, wow.
I'm not great at any
Your
other
Chinese
languages
isn't
than...
as sharp as it used to be, huh?
No, exactly. It's not... Yeah, I did retain most of it from primary school. So, so a lot of my translation goes through like ChatGPT or Google Translate, and then goes to one of the other members who's like, sometimes it's good enough and sometimes it's absolutely horrendous, and then they'll tweak it. But it's like, you come with the solutions first and then with the problems. Because if I just come with like, okay, well, here's to do list for you to solve, then it's just going to add to their workload. They're not going to be happy. So
yeah. I think when all the dust settles, like one of the great use cases for artificial intelligence will just be the first draft.
Yeah.
Rarely the polished thing, but the first draft is really helpful, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So let me see if I can think of interesting ways to break your video system. So I'm recording So I go to my company's website or my whatever I want to record, and I
Yeah.
record a session and I edit out all the mistakes.
Hmm.
And then the classic problem I've found with recording websites is you post that on your website as a kind of demo, and then 3 weeks later you decide to update the design, and now all your videos
Yeah.
are out of sync. So can I resupply the new CSS over the old DOM event recording with any hope of it actually looking good?
Well, you could in theory, not in practice at the moment.
Okay. I love the
What you
honesty. Give it to me.
yes, what you can do very easily is because so I'll give a tiny little history lesson. Anyway, since 18 something, we've like a video has been just frames and either uh, pieces of image or pixels, and because we are really looking at the events and the whole thing is JSON, we've kind of had to rethink what are the basic building blocks of a story, of a
Okay.
narrative, of a video tutorial. And so what we've come up with are basically these kind of like user actions. So if you click on something, you're going to have to explain to your customers or your users that they're going to have to click on that as well. Um, and if you fill in a form field, if you type something, you're probably going to have to explain that as well. So these are all these kind of like user actions.
Right.
And we break up the whole story into these different actions. But that also means that if certain actions aren't relevant anymore, or for example, you have a form and there's like a new version of GDPR, which you need an extra checkbox or something like that,
Mm.
then you could very easily say, okay, well, this bit here not relevant anymore. Let me just delete that, and then I'll re-record that little block, and then the voiceover that you had attached to it, you can just add to it very very easily. So that makes the whole maintenance part of it a lot easier. Whereas before, video feels more like kind of like something that's set in stone and it's not
Mm.
malleable. It's not clay. It's like baked. And with us, or with Record Once, that's really not the case. You can really really tweak it, change it, update it, change the voiceover after the fact. People think it's confusing. Then we just change it again and keep doing that. And whenever you hit save, every place that you've published it will get updated automatically. So that's
Oh,
why
that's
we
quite good.
try and tackle the maintenance piece. Um, we actually started with making a system that will auto update the videos, and we found that we have all of the code for that, and that's possible. Except there's a bunch of setup that you need to do. You need to get your application in a certain state, and we found that recording takes much less time than actually setting up the state. So to force this kind of on people that they need to have this really rigorous setup and this really rigorous teardown piece would basically make it so that it becomes a lot harder to record. So we've gotten out of people's ways in that regard, and that's how we've kind of tried to make it as simple as possible.
Okay. So what are the limits? What's the point at which I can't make a simple tweak and I have to re-record the session?
So major UI changes, for example, like you said, you go from the color blue to color red or something like that. Change your logo, then you'd have to re-record everything. But you can still keep the voiceovers, which saves a lot of time. Uh, we have one customer who has been recording 190 videos over the last 12 years, not with our system. And they were like, okay, well, let's create a 5-year plan to re-record everything because they went through a rebranding.
Right.
Um, they use our software, and then they found out that they can basically do a video or re-record a video from scratch in 15 minutes. So that's what they've been consistently being able to do. And then if it's only 15 minutes, then it becomes less of a problem to have to re-record it basically.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I can buy that. Yeah. Because after one or two re-recording of a video, your heart sinks every time you think about changing the shape of a button.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been there.
yeah, yeah. And
Okay,
when
so
it's
I'm trying to think
suddenly,
of other
mhm.
interesting ways to break this. You've kind of hinted at this, but are there some frameworks which are better supported? Like if I write my website in React, am I going to have a better time than if I write it in jQuery?
Um, React has been doing some evil stuff recently with monkey patching certain things. So
Oh,
maybe I'm, to be honest, I forget what exactly it was that they monkey patched. It became a whole, it kind of exploded
I didn't hear that
in
one.
the community. So I think they reversed it. But um, uh, if you're using some stuff that's really, really cutting edge, only supported by like one browser or something like that, then there's a good chance we won't have we won't have created any support for it yet. If you have a really kind of like old school, kind of like non-single page web app type of application, then there's a good chance we're going to record absolutely everything perfectly, and you won't ever bump into bump into an issue. But it's kind of it's kind of like that. And then at the moment, yeah, if you're using Salesforce, my pull request isn't merged,
Right.
so when that gets merged, then it'll be fine. But at the moment, it's not. But Angular seems to do a lot of this monkey patching as well. But we have a lot of fixes for that, and then the Salesforce pull requests that I've got out there, so that will probably fix it for once and for all, basically.
Yeah, I hope you're right, but it feels like you're going to be
Yeah.
you're going to be maintaining small differences and problems introduced by people for years.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
just
we
the burden of the
recently,
job.
it's part of the job, unfortunately. Yeah, we recently had this thing where certain situations would, with certain CSS strings, would create they would create an infinite loop on playback. And then we solved that. Um, and then that broke certain other situations. So it's like it was this thing where it kind of went around in circles, and we had 3 different releases in short succession that all were really painful for certain people. Certain specific cases, and that was also one of those moments where we're like, okay, well, we shouldn't be we shouldn't be maintaining our own CSS parser. That doesn't make any sense.
Ah,
Yeah. And
yeah.
in this case, we went to post CSS, and then that's kind of like solved for once and forever. Um, and then we just need to keep typing post CSS in that case. But there's certain things like hover where we have to go through style sheets, and we have to add a new hover class to it, because a pseudo class, of course, we can't trigger hover on playback, not normally, because we can't kind of like commandeer your mouse. So we have to fake it basically by adding these hover classes to everything that was hovered upon.
Does this
Um,
introduce like a runtime burden on the site being recorded then? A noticeable one?
um, not for the hover piece, but in general, yes. Mostly it's unnoticeable. Sometimes there's certain websites that add a lot of different um, of a lot of nodes, like hundreds of thousands of DOM nodes at the same time.
Mm.
And then if you have very advanced filtering and masking and blocking um, settings, then it will have to check every single one of those, and then that can slow it down.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. So it's still, I guess it's always going to be use case specific how well something like this is going to work.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, are you at all tempted? Is it in the roadmap? Would it be a problem for you to think, well, what if we made this file format and like if we went to the browser makers and said, let's have a
Hmm.
new standard about how Mutation Observer works, and all the browsers supported a specific spec, would that be good for you?
One thing that would really be helpful for us is apparently there's not like the whole style sheet piece. Browser vendors, for good chunks of it, they don't have a spec for it, so they're kind of just doing something. So there's a good example. It's like if you do margin and in CSS you do margin, and then you say, okay, margin should be this variable name, which you can do nowadays. Yeah, that's great. But then you ask the browser, like, okay, which CSS styles are applied. It will say, okay, well, margin left is this CSS value, margin right is this CSS value, margin top and bottom this CSS value. But that's not what you told the browser. You told the browser margin is this CSS value, and it kind of just extrapolates it in
Oh,
the
so as it
incorrect way.
unpacks the shorthand versions of the CSS name,
Yes,
which you then can't recapture.
exactly. Yeah. So we kind of have to try and figure out what happened, and then kind of rebuild it. And I ended up creating some some tickets in the kind of like the bug tracking systems for like Chromium and stuff like that. And then I got yelled at a bunch where it's like, no, the browser is not a browser bug. It's there's no spec for this. So so I was like, okay. Still, it's
Yeah,
broken though.
yeah.
So yeah, so that sort of thing. There's certain cases where we really, for example, I'm on MDN documentation site, like a lot of developers are, and I'll end up into these pages where the links are red. Basically, means that there's no documentation for that piece. So
Oh,
those are the issues that we're really bumping into. It's like there's no documentation for it. There's no spec for it. Browsers are just kind of doing something, and and they're doing it incorrectly often, and that's really yeah, really painful. Um, the rest is like, we can. It's not ideal, but we can handle it basically.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I feel like compared to 2000 and something, like browsers are much more similar and much more stable than they ever have been.
Yeah,
But maybe I
yeah,
just don't
for sure.
peer deeply enough into the abyss.
Yeah, there's Safari's been. I know everybody likes to complain about Safari, and it's my main browser, and I do really love it. But it's some certain things, it's like, yeah, didn't support certain things with um, regards to web workers and stuff like that. And yeah, uh, there are definitely certain issues where browsers just do it completely different, and then we kind of have to figure out what we need to do. Yeah,
Okay, so just fighting the good fight is your future.
yeah.
Do you have anything larger than that to look forward to in the future? Or is that what are your plans?
Um, well, it's it's nice because the project is like, it's growing. We can see more and more companies kind of like um, kind of enabled because of the open source project. So that that's really nice to see, basically. um, and yeah, and then growing our own company. That's of course also something that I'm looking forward to. I've been working on it for 4 years now, so it's nice to yeah, make that bigger and stuff like that. And there's certainly some bigger changes in our with regards to privacy that I would really like to see. Uh, and that will happen someday, but not today, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you want to give me one example?
Oh, just better standards, better defaults, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd like us to kind of identify this personal information somehow, like email address, so very clear pattern. if it's an email address, I just don't want us to record it, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe the same with IP addresses and stuff like that. So just identifying that sort of personal identifiable information, that'd be great. And we've done some big changes on the replay side to create a whole virtual DOM and then do some virtual DOM diffing so that the browser doesn't have to.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I would like to do is run that on the server and basically be able to recombine or basically flatten some of the full snapshots with the diffs, and then say, okay, well, actually, I only really care from. So this is our recording. I only really care from here to here. So instead of having to have that full snapshot with all the stuff in front, I can just flatten it and recreate that. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to building for the project as well. That's going to save people a lot of storage space and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's a nice little data processing project.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I best leave you to cycle off and get back to that. But
Yeah, thank you.
for now, Justin, thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you, Justin. I'll put links to RRWeb and Record Once in the show notes as usual. And if you want to check it out, one of the Record Once demos that jumped out at me was a game of Tetris. You can play Tetris and then rewatch the session from the events that you've just spawned by playing it. It's a really nice demonstration of quite how far and how complex it can get. But before you go and play Tetris, if you've liked this episode, please click like, rate it, review it, maybe share it with a friend. That always helps. The feedback is always appreciated. And if you share it, the feed forward is always appreciated too. If this is your first time here, you may not know that Developer Voices is weekly, so make sure you're subscribed, and then YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're hearing this will let you know as soon as we're back. If you're a regular listener and you're already subscribed, I will just let you know that there's a Developer Voices Patreon account if you want to support a long and healthy future stream of episodes. And thanks very much to everyone who's already signed up. There is now some prospect of this becoming a real sensible and sustainable job, which is both unbelievable to me and to my wife, and yet something I'm quite ready to believe in. With that dream of the future in mind, it's time for me to go. I've been your host, Chris Jenkins. This has been Developer Voices with Justin Halsall. Thanks for listening.